Hello guys, Theodore Burns here again for the second week now. I've done the Formula Sprint walkthrough. This week we are at the Charlotte Roval-2018 edition. This is week 12 in the season, so maybe a couple weeks here before I can help us out again. So this particular week I ran a 1 minute 6.789 earlier tonight in the an official practice session. It's my 5th lap in the run. So just like last week, I'm going to play through the lap one time. I'm going to go back and walk through each individual corner. Alright, so that was a lap of the Charlotte Roval. So first thing I would like to point out is I like to set my brake bias a little bit lower. Even though this is the fixed setup, we can adjust the brake bias, and so at this particular track I've gone down 2 clicks, which brings us to, I believe it's 57.3%. I find that gives the best turning capability at this particular track without making the rear end too unstable through trail braking. So, starting off here, coming into turn 1, I'm looking at the brake markers up here in the fence, looking particularly at the one board here. And so this is going to be my brake marker turn-in point. So you can actually end up braking a little bit before the one board. I brake right at the one board for this particular lap. It doesn't really matter. You don't lose a whole lot of time either way. So now I'm turning down looking for my apex. Is right at the the center of the curb here, but I want to make sure I avoid the blue curb. That stands true around the entire track. The blue curb will upset the car a lot, but I want to try and clip right out the transition, clip the red and white curb. It'll help rotate the car a little bit, but I want to get most of the rotation done prior to then. And in this particular case, I can actually be just slightly outside of it because I've gotten the car rotated. If you do clip this, it may upset the car a little bit. It may affect your getting back to throttle. So I certainly do not advise hitting that on cold tires, on your first or second lap of a run. If you want to be a little bit more consistent in the race, maybe try and get real close to it, stay off of it. So in this case, I've gotten the car nice and rotated. I'm actually able to get on throttle before I even reach the apex here. And as the car gets fully rotated, I can get back to full throttle. Now, I want to be careful here not to get on full throttle too early because I will push out and end up in the wall here, and that's not ideal. So if I get the car fully rotated, that's when I can get back on full power. And keep a nice large steering input into here, and just so you can drive the car right around and come nowhere close to the wall, don't have to worry. So these first 2 corners here, the 2 left-handers, I kind of string them together because I never actually go straight on the wheel. I keep turning into it the entire time. So for the second corner here, I'm looking at the inside concrete wall here, and it's really hard to see where it ends, right at the pit out. So I'm just going to turn the car down into there, keeping it full throttle, and try and get as close to that concrete wall as possible, and that's basically what I'm looking for. And once the wall ends, you see right here, right at the pit exit, I can keep hugging this the pit exit line, the blue and white line. Try and stay mid to left of the track, coming out of this section here, set us up better for the next portion. So that's the first corner here. Actually, I should mention I only go down to fourth gear in the first corner. You can go to third, be a little bit more consistent through some laps, especially in a race. You know, if you want to just take it easy, cold tires, so forth. But in this particular case, just be fourth gear. Play through that one more time. Right, so coming into the next section here, this infield section, we have a nice little bit of camber in the road here to help us turn the car around in these in this next section of two long right-handers. So coming into this first one, I'm actually staying on throttle as I turn into the corner, and I'm really trying to drive the car down to the apex. I want to get nice and tight here, avoiding the blue curb again, but get nice and tight down onto this curbing best I can. And so I actually try and drive the car down to the curbing there, as opposed to lifting early and then trying to turn in. I'll end up losing quite a bit of speed in that process, and I won't actually be able to get the car turned down as well. So drive the car in, and now I've finally lifted. Once I've come down, I'm approaching the corner. Just a touch of brake to help bring the front down and decrease my radius here, so I don't end up going wide. So in this particular case, we want to try and maximize our exit out of the second corner here. Because we have a bit of a straight afterwards. So we don't really want to, try and, maximize this first corner and, power into the second one. We're not going to gain a whole lot of time there. We're going to gain more time with a better exit down the straightaway. And so part of that is, like I said, hitting the brake there so that I don't end up out here onto the red and white painted area, almost outside of the track. Because that actually you lose all the camber in the road there, and it slopes out, and it's really hard to get it turned into the next corner. So I hit the brakes there to bring my radius in, but now I'm actually back on throttle because the car is turning really well, and if I just coast this whole section here in between the two corners, I'm going to lose quite a bit of time. But at the same time, it's not quite full throttle because then I'll end up, pushing a little bit too wide, not be able to get turned in. So it's kind of a nice, it's kind of I'm feathering the throttle, a little bit on the brake, just trying to keep the car rotated, keep a nice rotation going through this corner. And this is, one of the rare instances where you're, kind of feathering, both at the same time. So coming out of this corner, you can do it right at the corner before it. I'm going to come down to fourth gear. And I'm going to keep turning into the corner here, and you can really see here how it kind of comes down into, a low point right at around the apex of the corner here. And then it really flattens out up on exit. So I want to try and get down as close as I can to this blue curb without hitting it to really get the car turned around there and rotated. So what I'm doing here is I'm keeping quite a bit of steering input into the corner. So that I can try and get as close to this as possible, and I'll actually kind of modulate my radius coming into here with the gas and brake. If I need to bring it a little bit tighter, I'll be carrying a little bit of trail brake. Otherwise, I'll be on throttle, a little bit to increase that radius. Bring the front of the car up and almost understeer a little bit so I can get it right down to the point there. And it's kind of a nice game of playing what's best. Then once I get the car down here, I'm on the curb, getting right up close to the blue curbing, and I've rotated around here, and now I can start to get back on throttle, try and get as best a run out down the straight here as possible. Again, I'm staying in fourth gear for this corner because I've carried quite a bit of speed in. You can take third gear through here, is much more comfortable. Do that on cold tires. Do that in the race, if you're not being pressured from behind. And on exit here, you want to use all of the track here on exit. We fortunate that you can ride right over the red and white curb, no issues here, all the way out to the grass before you gain a 1x. You don't want to go anywhere on the grass because not only will you gain the 1x, but you can lose a lot of traction, seeing a lot of spins down into the inside wall here, down the straightaway, and that's not ideal. Losing time, we're having to lift a lot. So you want to make sure you get all that rotation done really early in the corner so that you can maximize your exit down the track and get on throttle as soon as possible at the same time without driving off the track. So we're going to play through that section here one more time for us. coming up to this next string of two right-handers together. I'm looking for my turn-in point is right where the red and white transition comes over here onto the black asphalt. So I'm staying way over here on the left side of the track, and I like to ride over the white here a little bit. You can do about half the car. In this case, it's more of a full car. But I'm keeping on throttle. I'm really driving through this first corner here, and I'm trying to get down right to the end of the curbing here with a really late apex. So the reason I'm looking for a really late apex here is because I've driven full throttle all the way through this corner, but I really have to slow down for this next right-hander here as it crests up over the hill. And so I want to get as late of an apex as possible so I can almost make this a little straight here so that I can actually slow down and use my brakes. Because braking when you're turning, pulling a lot of lateral G's, you'll end up spinning out, and that's not good. So what happens right here is I end up straightening my hands back out right as I let up off of the gas and give a little bit of brake. You don't need a whole lot of brake here. Only get up to about 20%. It's a lot of this track is not much braking at all. It's not very dependent on the brakes like the Daytona short track was. So it's just a little bit of trail brake, and so I'm starting to look here, and I want to get the car rotated as early as possible and have kind of a late apex. And so I want to bring it down really close to the concrete wall here, and right where the curbing kind of juts out is where I'm looking for my apex, right near the end of this curbing. And I try and keep it as tight to that as possible. And once I get to this apex here, because I've done my turn extremely early as I've been coming up the hill, so right now as I'm cresting over the hill, I can actually start to get back on throttle and without driving off the track. So if you wait and take too shallow of a line into this corner, or wait to turn until you've reached there, you have a really wide missed the apex here. It's really easy to end up going off over here onto not only the painted curbs but also into the grass. I've seen that. It's probably the most common mistake I've seen in the practice sessions so far. So it's real important if you do take a wider line out of here, you don't want to get on throttle. You almost want to coast it, kind of throw away that lap, but save your consistency. And so again, even though I've gotten back on throttle, I'm still not full throttle through here, and I'm keeping quite a bit of steering angle to try and keep the car, because everything's going against us here. We're cresting up over a hill. The car is really light. The front end's going to be sliding, so it's really trying to keep the car, bring it back as best we can. And finally here, I'm nice and safe, about car length away from the curbing here, which sets us up nicely for the next corner, and I can get back on full throttle here coming out. So go play back through this section here one more time in real speed. So turning into this next corner, I want to say this is probably the most important corner on this racetrack, because it leads on to the longest straightaway, all the way through NASCAR turns 1 and 2 and the entire length of the backstretch. So it's very critical to get a good run out of here. So starting off, the first of the two left-handers here, I'm keeping it nice and tight, trying to keep it right on the cones, right on this blue and white line. I don't want to be out here, because then it'll be real easy to get sucked into the concrete wall that comes up really fast. So you can take a little bit shallower line here, but then you kind of have to do some adjusting before you take the left-hander up onto the oval. So I like to try and keep the left side tires right on the line here. You notice I've stayed mostly on throttle. Now I'm giving a little bit of lift early because again, we're cresting up over another hill. I don't want to drive myself into the concrete barrier here. So bring the car back in. I'm able to get a little bit of throttle in, but now I'm going to do one more lift here to get this left-hander up onto the oval. So I've tried to take this flat all the way up through there, and it doesn't work out too well. I usually end up in the wall up there, scrubbing some speed somewhere. It's just really hard to do, if at all possible, to do it quickly. So I find you still need just a little lift to this corner, getting back up onto the oval. And in this scenario, it's best to do this lift early. Because if we do the lift early, then we can be on throttle, at this point and have the best run as possible out, up onto the oval and, start with the, highest maximum speed we can getting onto the straightaway. It's much better than, driving this section all the way up to the wall here and then doing our lift, and then we just killed all of our momentum and we have to, rely on the engine trying to get the power back down the straightaway, and that's just bad. So we want to do this lift early. So here I lift out and I give a little bit of brake to try and bring the car down. And so what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for this concrete wall, and I want to get the left side of the car as close to this concrete wall, as I can. And so it's kind of coming in here that looks like I'm going to turn into it. So what I've actually done is I've started to get back on throttle pretty aggressively, increase my radius, almost like understeer the front of the car. And so I end up missing that wall. But I've now I'm on a nice trajectory to keep a nice tight radius up here onto the oval. And so now I'm able to get on full throttle here despite having all these bumps because I know that I've gotten the car rotated. I kept it nice and tight there. I already have a nice radius coming into here. And as the car even starts to push out with all the throttle on, I have all the banking here and all the camber in the road to really help turn me, so I don't end up all the way up there in the wall. So now I'm going to keep a nice steady steering angle coming up over all these bumps. Doesn't really upset the car, and the banking here will help us. And I start to unwind the steering. So the fastest line around this corner is going to be right here on the bottom, but I don't want to, decrease this radius and like tighten the corner so I end up right on the bottom. I open my hands up so I can carry as much speed as possible, but at the same time keeping a nice comfortable distance away from the wall up here, and not lingering around the top of the track, because you're going to be losing a lot of time taking the longer distance around there. So I've opened my hands up, and I'm going to smoothly but quickly get right down onto the bottom here. I'm kind of aiming, just to drive right down onto the bottom of the corner here, and carry that all the way around onto the backstretch with the left side tires right on that paint. So we can play through this section here, these two corners, one more time. So, coming up to the backstretch chicane. This chicane you can take flat out once you've gotten everything up to temperature. You have a nice, smooth line, good approach into it. And cold tires, first couple laps, you have to be careful and you have to do a little bit of a lift through here. And so the same thing with coming onto the straightaway. You want to do your lift early if you can. So you want to do your lift, right around this the first corner here, so that you can get the best run out of the third and fourth corners and back up onto the straightaway. So you don't lose any time down the straightaway there. In other words, you don't want to charge in through the first two and then sacrifice your exit here. And even in the race, I'll end up doing a little lift there. Later laps, I'm not being pressured from behind, just to be more consistent. So as you saw, I came out of the corner right on the white and blue line. But coming up the straightaway, I've moved up into this middle lane here, and I put the left side tires right up on this paint stripe here. So I found that's kind of a good reference point where I'm not too wide and really sweeping into the corner, but I'm not really shallow. So it gives me a really nice reference point to always aim into the corner here, so I can get the best and most consistent line through here every single time. So right about when these lines end, I'm going to start to turn into the corner, and I really want to take a lot of this first curb here. I don't want to hit the second curb at all, and I want to try and keep as tight to the third one as possible, because we all know the fourth one here, you have the two blue curbs on the fourth one. If you hit any of that, you end up in the wall spinning down the backstretch, and that's a really bad time. So in order to avoid a lot of that, it all comes up here into the first curb. So again, I don't want to hit the blue, but I want to get and ride over the red and white curb as close to it as I can as possible. And then as soon as I get over that, I've lost the camber of the road, and I'm going to start loading up the left side. I got to start turning back right away. It's a smooth transition, just like last week at Silverstone. smooth steering input, but still quick. And so I'm trying to turn back and stay really tight here onto the third curb. With a little bit of a lift, it's really quite easy to actually come and bring the right sides right over that, and then it's a really nice exit out of there. In this particular case, because I'm staying full throttle through here, it's a little hard to get actually onto that curb, so I'm just going to come real close to it. But I'm able to get back up and avoid the blue curbs here. I ride over the red and white, which will still give me a little bit of a kick, but it's manageable. I don't lose a whole lot of speed. So the max speed of this car around the track is about 146, maybe 147 I've seen on newer tires. Obviously that could change in a draft. This is just single car speed. But I hit quite a bit of a kick right there, but it only drops me down to 144, so that's a pretty decent exit coming out of there. Would have liked to have tried to avoid that fourth curb a little bit more, but only losing 2 miles an hour and then able to get right back up to speed and onto the bottom here as quickly as possible is it's pretty good. So I'll play through that chicane here one more time from the back stretch. So coming up to the final chicane, the final corners here, I've hugged this white and blue line all the way down here, and I'm going to keep the car nice and tight and try and find the next white and blue line right on the grass line here, and turn the car in really sharp left. So this is another one of those corners where there's not a great braking reference. What I've kind of been using is this line here coming, this line in the track where the pavement's patched together, where it kind of comes around, and I've just been kind of using that. Once I'm driving, right here on the grass, once I start approaching that pretty quickly, that's what I'm kind of using as my braking reference. And you can brake early for this corner. You don't. The last thing you want to do is brake too late, because then it's really easy to blow it the second turn here, and that's really hurts your entire lap time. You may get the off track. You have a slowdown penalty, and that's just no fun. So if anything, I wouldn't push this corner too far. And this is the only hard braking zone on the entire track, and even then we still let up pretty early. So we're coming in here in 6th gear. Get my hands straight as I hit the brakes. Going to come down to 4th gear, and now I start to turn in. I start to bring a lot of trail brake into the corner to really get the car rotated as early as possible. And so I'm looking to get right up on the transition. Try and get right on the edge of the red and blue curbs here. In the chase cam, we end up just clipping the red and white, but notice how I've kept the car nice and rotated because of all that trail brake, which I've brought almost down entirely to the apex of the corner. Just finally letting off of the brakes right there. That gets the car nice and rotated already. So I'm already pointing in a straight line, out of the next corner. So it's really easy. At this point I can start to actually get back on throttle. Because I start to drive that way. The curb helps rotate the car a little bit, and now I can really turn and take a late apex on this corner to get a nice run out of it. And so again, this one you don't want to hit the blue curb because you'll end up in the wall here, but you can ride over the red and white curb pretty easily. And then once I've gotten the car straight, can start to get back on throttle. Maybe mind a little bit of oversteer there, but it's certainly none to be really uncomfortable with, and end up nice half a car width away from hitting the wall here. So I'll play through this section here one more time. Okay, and so that was a lap around the Charlotte Roval-2018 for the Formula Sprint Series Week 12. So maybe a couple weeks before I make another video here for you guys, but thanks for all the feedback last week, and hopefully this video helps you guys go a little bit faster, be a little bit more consistent, and start with a nice base for all the races this week. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you out on track.